Hi, Morgan. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Good, good. Like Matt, you're also a graduate student. I was hoping that you could provide an overview of your research with ELISA.
Sure. I'm a master's student at UNR. I'm studying welfare traits for our sheep at the university. We are using enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays to analyze cortisol levels and samples that we have from our sheep. This is quantify the stress load that they're experiencing in order to see which animals are performing better under the stressors that they are experiencing. So these animals are extensively reared, meaning that they're out on the rangeland. They're not being monitored as closely, so they don't have as much shelter or nutrients, as well as experiencing like a lot of heat because they're in the middle of the desert. So we're trying to see if we can breed like almost a super animal to cope with these. So we're using these eventually to have better welfare for our animals when we're experiencing in our natural climate.
That is very impressive. My understanding regarding ELISA is that it differs from GCMS chromatography mass spec because it excels in high throughput applications. Could you walk us through the process of preparing the wool samples?
It's quite lengthy. So basically, I have to wash the wool samples because they're very fine. They're very high quality merino wool. So washing them and then mincing and grinding them to create the greatest surface area to extract as much cortisol as possible. They then are left in methanol for about 20 hours. And then after that, I extract the supernatant and I use a nitrogen blower. I actually have one right behind me to dry down that supernatant and just have the leftover cortisol to later quantify in our ELISAs. They happen to be a lot more accurate and more cost effective than the other methods that have been explored, especially for my particular lab. We don't have as much equipment, so it is really great to have all of these abilities to analyze the cortisol without buying super expensive equipment.
Very good. Yeah, and I'm certainly happy to hear that the nitrogen blower made the list in terms of the equipment that you can utilize for this work. What advantage does the nitrogen evaporator provide? How would you do the work if you didn't have that equipment?
Oh god, it would be a lot slower, that's for sure. With the nitrogen evaporator, the heat setting helps evaporate it obviously a little bit faster, but also prevents the deterioration of the cortisol as exposure to oxygen does deteriorate it. So we wouldn't be able to get the same red. So it just makes it a much quicker process. So it's less exposure to oxygen as well as the UV, which will also deteriorate it.
Morgan, I'm very happy to hear that the organomation equipment is able to support your research. Based on your findings, how might these cortisol monitoring techniques be applied to other types of livestock?
So there's actually a lot of research for other livestock, such as cows, for example, as well as like monkeys. They do a lot of research in that, as well as horses, things like that. There's not as many research papers, sheep specifically. But basically, we want our livestock to be able to cope with these stressors because we put them under so much pressure to produce so much for the growing population, and so we have to make sure that we're thinking about their well-being as well.
That's great. Yeah, very important work. I appreciate you speaking with me today.
Thank you for having me.